I'm not sure. Glenn might have the latest count.
Okay. Glenn, is anybody absent tonight?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Looks like Mr. Scown's not here. I'm gonna check my email.
Okay.
No, I don't have a message, but you do have 8.
Yeah, I'd say the time has arrived, Dave.
Yeah, okay. I was thinking the same thing. So I'll call the Wednesday, January 26th meeting of the Cumberland Planning Board to order. Roll call, Ms. Vrashich,
Here.
Mr. McDonald,
Here.
Mr. Butler,
Here.
Mr. Bush,
Here.
Ms. Reese,
Here.
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Here.
Mr. Costa,
Here.
and the chair is present. Okay. Before we begin, Glenn, is there anybody in the queue at all?
There are 16 attendees right now. Some are applicants or representing the applicants, and others are members of the public.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this little blurb we have here. This meeting is being held virtually on the Zoom platform. If you have an interest in any of the items on the agenda, we will turn on your audio and promote you to a panelist as the item is called. If you would like to comment on any item or ask a question, please raise your hand by clicking on the button labeled "Raise Your Hand" when the chairman opens the floor for public comment. So, moving right along, approval of the planning board minutes of November 23rd, 2021. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions?
No. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the minutes be accepted as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. McDonald. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. We will do, as we always do on virtual, I will call the roll. Ms. Vrashich,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown, I see you here.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay. Before we continue, I want to wish everyone a happy new year. I know it seems like it's been a millennium since the last time we were together, but just the same, happy new year to everyone. And moving right along, the director's report, Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I want to mention is that Ann and Hope is, there's a dialogue going on with Ann and Hope about Blackstone Valley Prep and with St. Patrick Church as a redevelopment project. We'll let you know at what point they reach fruition. Will be coming before you.
Board have any other questions? Hearing none, we're going to move right along to item 4, which is the request for bond reduction, owner applicant Trinity Properties of RI LLC, project name Blackberry Bluff, location off Valley Stream Drive, assessors plat 39 lot 6. The applicant is requesting a reduction of performance and maintenance bonds. Mr. Stevens.
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. It's Glenn Modica. So the applicant is requesting a bond reduction for the Blackberry Bluff development, which is located off Valley Stream Drive. the Public Works Department has inspected this residential subdivision, and they are recommending a full release of the performance bond in the amount of $180,063. They are also recommending maintaining the maintenance bond for a period of 1 year in the amount of $36,013. And Mr. Jeff Hansen from Millstone Engineering has been promoted to a panelist.
Okay. At this point, does the board have any questions regarding this request? Hearing none. Does Mr. Hanson have anything else to add at this point?
No, I've just very quickly that I reviewed this with Bob Baldwin of Trinity Properties, and we have no concerns with the recommendation from Public Works.
Okay, thank you. Back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion in regards to Blackberry Bluff Valley Stream Development Phase 3, that the site improvement bond be reduced by the full amount of $180,063, and that the maintenance bond, which was issued in the amount of $36,013 as a maintenance guarantee, be retained for the required period of 1 year or at time whereupon the Department of Public Works has accepted and certified the completion of all the DPW requirements for the incidental and administrative work described in Mr. Entow's memo dated January 18th, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Uh,
Second.
Oh, second by Mr. Costa. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call. Ms. Fawcett,
yes,
Mr. McDonald,
yes,
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
yes,
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and the chair votes votes yes.
New-
We have another panelist here, I just noticed.
Yeah.
Little
we got
furry
new-
one. Okay.
Stanley. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Item number 5, zoning board of review recommendation, owner applicant, Blue Island Construction Services Corporation, location 15 Pine Road, assessors plat 64, lot 579. The applicant requests dimensional variances from the front yard and side yard setbacks for a house that has already been constructed. Mr. Stevens? Is
I think
Mr.
Glenn's going to handle this one.
Yes, Mr. Modica. Glenn?
All right, so the applicant has recently completed a single-family dwelling on this 0.31 acre lot. When reviewing the as-built plans, the Public Works Department determined that the house did not meet minimum front yard and side yard setback requirements, so thus necessitating this after the fact request for zoning relief. The required minimum front yard setback is 50 feet. The building foundation meets this setback, but the issue here is that the roof overhang is about 10 inches over the front yard setback. So the applicant's requesting 10 inches of relief. The side yard setback is supposed to be 20 feet, but the north wall of the house has a setback of about 18.6 feet. So the applicant is requesting about 1 foot 5 inches of relief. The planning department finds that this is a minimal amount of relief to request and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the department recommends that the planning board forward a favorable recommendation to the zoning board of review to approve the dimensional variances for the front and side yard setbacks.
Does the board have any questions? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion in regards to 15 Pine Road that we send a recommendation to the zoning board of review that the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and include Mr. Modica's memo dated January 18th, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Whoop, second, who was the first one? Oh, second by Mr. Scown. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Ms. Flaschich,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes, the motion carries. Okay. Next item of business. Item number 6, zoning board of review recommendation, owner applicant Lorraine A.L. Sloper, location 6 Avalon Place, assessors plat 23, lot 135. Applicant requests variances from side yard setback to construct a new garage. Mr. Modica?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've promoted the applicant, Lorraine Sloper, and the engineer, Manny Paiva. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but they are now panelists. So the subject property is about 0.68 acres. It includes a single-family dwelling built in 2001. There is an integrated 2-car garage on the west side of the house. The applicant proposes to convert that garage to a great room and build a 60-square-foot mudroom off the corner of the house that would connect to a new 2-bay garage, approximately 576 square feet. In this particular circumstance, the house is not parallel with the side lot line, so the garage will extend about 4 feet 10 inches from the side lot line at its closest point. The required minimum side yard setback is 10 feet, so the applicant is requesting 5 feet 2 inches of relief. Maximum lot coverage in this zone is 20%. Currently, the existing lot coverage is 24.6%. The addition of the mudroom and garage will occur in an area that's mostly built up with a driveway. It's already paved and impervious. So the lot coverage will increase only slightly by a little under 300 square feet. But in any event, the overall lot coverage will be 25%. And so the applicant is requesting 5% of relief, which is approximately 2,200 square feet. The department finds that the proposed petition is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The garage will be set back from the public right-of-way. The size, scale, massing, and materials is consistent with the existing dwelling and the surrounding neighborhood. The neighbor to the west at 4 Avalon Place will be most directly affected by the project, but the boundary at the side lot line between the two properties is screened by a raised berm planted with evergreen trees that should mitigate any visual effect resulting from new construction. So the planning department is recommending that the planning board forward a favorable recommendation to the zoning board of review to approve the dimensional variance for side yard setback and maximum lot coverage.
Board have any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, who was that?
McDonald,
Oh, Mr. McDonald. I'm sorry.
I read through this. I'm not opposed to this. And I suppose since it's going to the zoning board of review, and maybe this is just formality, but the third paragraph of Mr. Modica's memo, it's got maximum lot coverage, existing lot coverage, total lot coverage. And I was confused by the numbers. And if I did my math correctly, the percentages, the 20, the 24.6 and the 25% that Mr. Modica mentions are percentages based upon 1 square acre, 43,560 feet. The actual coverage, again, if I'm correct, the 8712 is actually 29%. The 10,716 is 36%. And the 10,890 feet is 37%. I can give you those numbers again if you want. It's a math exercise, but again, since it's going to the zoning board, it should read accurately.
Mr. McDonald, I think you had a different number for the size of the property, it's 29,621 square feet. Is that what you have?
Yes, and if you say, well, for instance, the first one, the lot coverage is 20%. If you take the 8,712 and divide by the 29,621, I don't think you come up with that percentage that you have.
Hmm.
It's
For instance,
29%.
20% is a fifth. So if you multiply 8,712 times 5, you come up with about 42,000 square feet.
Okay, we can do some more math, but I want to say that 320 square feet can be deducted from the driveway according to our zoning ordinance. So we can do some more math.
Well, I'm not trying to get into the weeds.
No, well, we want to get it right.
I'm trying to have it read correctly. Yeah, if you just take 8712 and divide into 29621, you come
Right,
up.
I got 29%.
That's correct. You got 20%. I'm just suggesting that those 3 percentages are off. Again, I support the idea of sending a positive recommendation. I'm just trying to have accurate figures.
I got you.
I have a coverage map. This is Manny Piva representing Laurie Sloper. That if you want me to present, however those numbers may be inaccurate, it's a visual that will show you the actual coverage from a photo rendering point of view that could maybe clear your mind on, 2/3 of the building is over a paved driveway that exists today, and there's only a little portion on both sides that cover a grass area. If the board felt they wanted to see that, I could pop that up real quick.
I think if
We have that.
if I understand Mr. McDonald's question along with his commentary, it's not a question of not being in favor of the recommendation as much as it's making sure that the numbers match. I think that's Mr. McDonald, am I correct? You're more concerned about the numbers matching.
Yes, it's really the percentages. The way Mr. Modica structured the paragraph is fine. It's just that the percentages of the lot in question are, they're in effect too low. Because again, if you divide 8712, for instance, by 43,560, which is an acre, you come up with 20%. But the lot is only 68 hundredths of an acre. And so the 3 percentages are 29%, 36%, and 37% in that third paragraph. So 20 becomes 29, 24.6 becomes 36, and 25 becomes 37.
Right.
That's what I got as well.
Right.
So at this point, it's just a matter of a little bit of house cleaning.
Right. Gotta
to,
change those.
accurately send these numbers to the zoning board.
I'll correct that.
Okay. Does the board have any other questions or comments at this point? It's my understanding that the applicant is present. If they would like to speak at this point, they are welcome to. Glenn, are they?
She's unmuted.
Oh.
I was on mute. No, I just wanted to say thank you and for considering us for this application. And we don't really have anything else to add unless you have any questions of us.
No. I'm very familiar with the house. I've been there.
Oh, no kidding. We don't
Yes, when it was owned by gentleman.
Charlie White.
Yeah, Charlie Weiss.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we bought the house in 2016.
yeah.
We absolutely love it here. Love the
Yeah.
town.
It's
from
a nice
Massachusetts.
area. The house is nice.
Yeah.
I haven't had a full tour, but.
Oh my God. It's so
Then again,
funny. Wow.
that's okay. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the board. Does the board have a motion for me?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion in regards to 6 Avalon Place that we send a recommendation to the zoning board of review that the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan. But with a note that they should look at the percentages in the application, to make sure that all the numbers are correct based on the actual size of the property, and include with the recommendation, Mr. Modica's memo of January 18th, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Frasic. I'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Frasic,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
No?
Ms. Reese?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and if chair votes yes, the motion carries. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Item 7, public hearing, major subdivision land development master preliminary plan for Menard's Estates, owner applicant Haley's LLC, Michael Menard, location 3650 Diamond Hill Road, Assessors Plat 42, Lot 5. The applicant is proposing to subdivide Assessors Plat 42, Lot 5 into 5 lots, 3 building lots, 1 lot to be donated to the Cumberland Land Trust, and 1 lot to contain the existing house. The applicant requests approval to combine master and preliminary plan waivers from the land development and subdivision regulations, approval of the combined master plan, preliminary plan, and approval of the performance and maintenance guarantees. This matter was continued from November 25th, 2021, planning board meeting. Again, I'm assuming it's Mr. Modica?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I just want everyone to know I did have to mute people because of all the background feed from the last one.
Okay,
So when you're ready to talk, you will be on mute because we're getting a lot of that background noise.
okay. Thank you. Mr. Modica?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is here, Mr. Menard. I've tried to promote him to panelist, but that doesn't seem to be working. The attorney is here, the engineer, and their planning consultant is also a panelist right now. And there are 2, 4, 7 members of the public who are present. So I just want to give a quick background on the project, which was first heard by this board in July 2021. And there has been a lot of public interest in the project, and to address the public outreach effort over the last 9 months, where we've mailed out 5 separate notifications for this project. For this meeting, we did not mail out abutter notifications for this hearing because the matter was continued from the November 24th meeting, and that constituted the required public notice. So I want people to be aware of that. The project was first heard at the July 2021 planning board hearing. And this project was to subdivide the property into 5 lots. 2 existing house lots were going to go on their own lot, and 3 new building lots were going to be created. The project required several waivers, especially from what was then in force, the holding ponds ordinance. The planning board received substantial public comment and discussion, and the project was continued to the August meeting, but that application was ultimately withdrawn. In August of last year, a related project was advertised for a 2-lot subdivision, which placed the 2 houses on one lot and divided that and placed each house on an individual lot. Moving on to the November meeting, this project was advertised for the final time, and the agenda stated that the applicant was requesting a continuance. The planning board voted to approve this request and continue the hearing until tonight. So it was that vote at the November public hearing that constituted the required public notice. So I just want everyone to be aware that because of that vote, the town and the applicant were no longer required to send certified mail to abutters and advertise the project. As a courtesy, the planning department did email people who had contacted us previously over the life of this project, and we sent the agenda and a link to access the meeting materials. Now I want to talk about holding ponds really quick, which we're now calling stormwater basins that were proposed for this project. When the project was originally heard in July 2021, the applicant requested several waivers from the holding pond ordinance that was then in effect. As the planning board knows, this ordinance has been revised. First, by moving it from the code of ordinances to the zoning ordinance. And second, by changing the requirements to make the holding pond ordinance more conforming to the environmental conditions of a particular property. The town council voted to approve all of the planning board's requested changes to this ordinance, except for one. The ordinance subcommittee recommended that the buffer from the edge of the basin be reduced from 50 feet to 25 feet, since they considered that to be a reasonable distance to allow maintenance vehicles to service the basin. So that has been the only change from what the planning board originally recommended to town council. And that ordinance was enacted on December 15th. Back to the Menard project, as it relates to stormwater basins. The basic premise of the original ordinance and our new, now revised ordinance is that the applicant has to demonstrate to the planning board that there are no other reasonable alternatives to installing a stormwater basin. Subsequent to that original July 2021 meeting, when this project was first heard by the board, the applicant re-engineered the project and they eliminated the stormwater basin entirely. They proposed adding porous pavers in the cul-de-sac, which is the extension of Green Meadow Lane, which would manage all the stormwater runoff. They proposed that a homeowners association would be responsible to clean and maintain these pavers. The town public works director reviewed this project and he determined that the pavers would require regular cleaning with special equipment and that maintaining the pavers would be potentially expensive. In the event the homeowners association did not maintain the pavers, let's say during the winter, water's no longer draining through the pavers and the road ices over, the responsibility to fix this problem would fall to the town because Green Meadow Lane extension will become a public road. So to fix the problem, the town would have to rent or purchase new equipment just to maintain a 150-foot segment of road that serves only 3 houses. The public works director rejected this proposal and he did not want the pavers. So the Menard project went back to the stormwater basin. The planning department feels that the applicant has made more than a reasonable and good faith effort to eliminate the stormwater basin, but it is the public works director preference that the basin should be retained. So tonight the applicant's presenting an updated plan that includes a stormwater basin and it does not require any waivers from the new stormwater basin ordinance. I just want to point out that the buffer of the basin from the edge of the basin has a 50-foot buffer, which is what the planning board wanted, even though the new ordinance is 25 feet. The basin also overlaps 2 lots, which is now permitted under the new ordinance, and the basin also has a 4-foot fence, which was reduced by ordinance from the original 6 feet. Some other substantive changes from what the planning board originally saw last year is that one lot will be donated to the Cumberland Land Trust. They own an adjacent property to the south. And the resulting subdivision now affects the proportions of 3 of the proposed house lots in terms of average lot depth to average lot width. So getting into the waivers that are being requested for this project. One, these are all waivers from the land development and subdivision regulations, which require lot proportion to have a ratio of 2.5 to 1. One thing I want to point out is on page 3 of the staff report in the bulleted section under lot proportion, I have lots 3, 4, 5, and 6. They should read 2, 3, 4, and 5. So those are the correct proportions to those corresponding lots 2 through 5. And if you saw the table in your packet that shows, just want to point out that the zoning ordinance contradicts our land development and subdivision regulations. Regulations require 2.5 to 1 proportion. If you look at our zoning and you calculate what the minimum lot width is required, the minimum lot area that is required, do a little math, figure out what the possible lot depth is. Only 5 of our lots, or 5 of our zoning districts have that ratio of 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1. The others range up to 16 to 1. I've highlighted the Menard Estates project in the R1 zone, which according to our zoning would allow a lot proportion of 4 to 1. So there is a contradiction there between our regulations and our zoning. But I think the intent of the regulations is that the lot proportion standards is to prevent the creation of unduly disproportional lots or oddly shaped lots, like flag lots, some that could be very long or narrow. The proposed lots in this case meet the minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet. And the department does not feel that these lots are severely disproportional or be antithetical to good planning practice. To mitigate potential visual effects due to the elongated lot size, the applicant will install vegetative buffers as much as feasible along the edges of proposed lot 2 and lot 4. The other waivers that are being requested are right-of-way width. Local streets are supposed to have a 50-foot right-of-way. 40 feet is proposed because that would match the existing right-of-way of Green Meadow Lane, and the Public Works Director concurs with this. All subdivisions are supposed to have sidewalks, but the planning department is recommending a waiver since there are currently no sidewalks on adjacent streets that these sidewalks could connect to. Finally, in terms of cul-de-sacs, the regulations say that they must have landscaped interior islands. Again, the Public Works Director has requested the applicant to pave the interior islands in order to facilitate snow removal. So the planning department finds that the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan and will have no negative environmental impacts. We're recommending approval to combine master preliminary plan because the application meets the requirements for both plans. We're recommending approval of the requested waivers from the land development and subdivision regulations and approval of the combined master preliminary plan with several conditions. One is that the applicant shall establish a homeowners association that includes within its bylaws an operations and maintenance plan for the stormwater basin. The applicant shall provide certification from the Water and Sewer Department, and that upon completion of the extension of Green Meadow Lane, the applicant shall petition the town council to accept the road as a town road. And one additional condition that I did not include in your documentation is that all of the conditions of the Cumberland Land Trust letter, which is included in your packet, dated November 15th, 2021, are carried out. If the planning board votes in favor of these approvals, the planning department recommends approving the improvement guarantee of $226,291. This includes a performance amount of $188,659 and a maintenance bond of $37,732. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. Mike Resnick on behalf of the applicant.
You're muted, Dave. Dave, you're muted.
I'm sorry, before we continue on, if the board does not have any questions or comments, I have two questions at this point. And one of them is relative to the open space parcel. Since it's essentially sort of landlocked, I think that this is up to how the board, and I'd like to hear the solicitor also chime in on this. Should there or shouldn't there be a need
Dave,
for an
you appear to
easement
be
to
muted
access it?
again, although it's not showing that you are.
No, I'm not.
I can hear him, Kelly. No, you can't?
How about everybody else?
No, I
I
can't
can
hear
hear
you.
him. I hear you.
I can hear him.
No.
Kelly, you're the
It's
only
me.
one, I guess. And I wanted to ask you that question. You still can't hear me? Okay, well, I'll ask Mr.
Well,
Stevens, Mr. Modica, relative to,
Kelly and I did discuss that exact question that you have.
Hmm,
And we did not feel that there would be any issues because the Cumberland Land Trust owns that adjacent lot. So there is access.
which
from
adjacent
Thomas-
lot is that? Okay, I see it.
It's 40,
42.127?
127. There is road access from Thomas Layton Boulevard North.
Okay,
So that lot is accessible. We did talk about should those two lots be merged by administrative subdivision, but we didn't feel that was necessary.
yeah, I was thinking about that too myself. Okay. And the other question that I have is, have we changed our approval block? Because right here it says Cumberland Planning Board approved under subdivision control law, and it's just a bunch of lines without any descriptors.
No, that'll be changed. There's nothing,
Okay,
there's nothing that's going to be signed for preliminary plan. That'll
all right,
change.
I just want to make sure that gets revised. It's just a housekeeping matter at this point. That's
Mr.
the
Chairman, I
only
just
comment-
want you to know, I couldn't hear anything. I think it was on my end. So I don't know if there were any questions for me, but
Well, Glenn actually answered it because evidently you had a discussion about whether there should be an easement or not to that open space. And then Glenn said, well, part of the reasoning that wasn't required was because there is an adjoining lot that the Cumberland Land Trust owns on Thomas Layton Boulevard North. And that there was also a question that what should or shouldn't you merge those two lots? But in any event, as long as there's access to it, that lot back there, I don't have an issue with it.
I think you do bring up a good point, though,
Hmm.
relative to requiring merger of the two lots, because in theory, one of them could be sold and then it would be landlocked.
Right.
I don't know really why they're doing that, honestly, unless it's just to make the lots less deep. I wouldn't mind hearing that, because to me, it's why is it important to give that to the land trust?
Other than to protect the wetland area there or that brook?
Yeah, I don't know what the reason is. I mean, there's
Yeah,
wetlands on
yeah.
private properties.
Mhm.
I just don't know if it was to lessen that dimensional issue, then I guess, okay, but I just don't, I would say if they really want to have that lot, maybe the merger is a good idea.
Okay. I think you're thinking about the width to depth ratio is now a little bit less than what it would be if it.
Yeah, and maybe
okay.
the applicant can explain why why that was done.
Okay. Well, those are and the other comment was, Ms. Salvatore, that the approval block needs to be revised. For right now it says Cumberland Planning Board approved land subdivision control law. It's not our standard block, that's all. It's just a, housekeeping matter more than anything else.
Thank you.
Okay, other than that, what I will do now, and thank you for waiting, I will open it up to the applicant's representative or the applicant themselves at this point.
You,
Just give
Mr.
us your
Chair.
name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Michael Resnick on behalf of the applicant. And I'm also joined here this evening by Christopher Andre, the project engineer, and Doug McLean, who is our professional planner and land use expert, who will be providing some testimony this evening. We've had a chance to take a look at the staff report that was issued by Mr. Modica. Very comprehensive, reviewed it in its entirety. We have no issues with it. It's a positive recommendation. We've taken a look at the conditions that have referenced in the staff report as well as the land trust letter, and we have absolutely no objection to any of those conditions. I think Mr. Modica gave a great history relative to the changes to the ordinance as it relates to the stormwater basin or drainage pond. As he had noted, we did make efforts to comply with section 16-6A of the regulations relative to demonstrating that the property could not be developed without an above ground stormwater basin. There were efforts, as was mentioned by Mr. Modica, to redesign the project to eliminate the stormwater basin, to use a porous paver in the cul-de-sac to manage stormwater. That was rejected by the DPW director. So we feel confident that we are in compliance with section 16-6A. With respect to waivers, there are 4 categories of waivers that are being requested, as was referenced by Mr. Modica. Number 2, relative to street right-of-way, section 7AC, was based on the Director of Public Works request. Number 3, relative to sidewalk installation, section 7AD, was relative to the fact that there are no sidewalks in the neighborhood. It would not serve a purpose as there would be no connection. And number 4, relative to cul-de-sac design, was also necessitated by a request by the Public Works Director, and that's section 7AH. So the waivers that I'd like to just discuss briefly before turning this over to my team is section 6E3, and that is the 1 to 2.5 ratio regulation relative to proportionality. And so we are seeking those waivers for lot 2, lot 3, lot 4, and lot 5, even though lot 5 is being proposed as a gift to the town, to the land trust. And Mr. Andre can answer Attorney Morris's questions relative to the thought process there, but my understanding is that this was for purposes of conservation. There are wetlands on site, and it was the plan of the developer to provide this to the land trust. I agree. I think that there certainly could be a merger of this. It's not landlocked because of that access through the lot that the land trust presently owns, but I don't think that that's something that's really within our purview. That would be up to the town. And I would just note that the development is in full conformance with the zoning code. There's no relief required from the zoning code. And as Mr. Modica mentioned, there is a discrepancy relative to proportionality. The zoning code allows for 4-1. And if we take a look at various zones within the 25 zoning districts, we do see that generally speaking, only about 5 would meet this ratio. So Mr. McLean, who's our professional planner and land use expert, will speak to these waivers. He will speak to the project's conformance with the comprehensive plan. But I just wanted to quickly go over that. And there are plans to, as Mr. Andrade will discuss, relative to buffering and the like, to further obviate any issue relative to the proportionality of the lots. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to turn this over to the project engineer, Mr. Andrade. And Mr. Andrade, but before you give a general overview of the plans, the revisions that were made for the board, I would just ask if you could please state your educational experience as well as your professional experience for the board.
Good evening, Chris Andrade with Insight Engineering, 1539 Fore of Ave in Seekonk, Massachusetts. Education, I have a bachelor's in architecture and have been working within this firm for the past 18 years, directly out of high school, project managing projects for the past 10 years. So with the design that we've come up with, the main thing we looked at was we initially came before the board and we listened to the town's request. We listened to the neighbors' concerns. We went back and we've made multiple renditions and revisions, a lot of lengthy conversations with Glenn and Jonathan Stevens, and even Kelly at times, where we just trying to discuss out and figure out the best course of action. We came up with alternative designs with the drainage, even above ground and below ground. And we were in final review. As Glenn had previously mentioned, DPW did not want the responsibility or potential responsibility of managing a paved waterways, paver islands that would handle stormwater management, which rendered that a moot design. And now we are essentially returning back to a variant of the first design that was seen. But obviously with this one, we are now in a point where it does meet the town's regulations and in regards to setbacks. The majority of the project, we're able to shorten the road by about 60 feet from the original design that you've seen, which allowed for a little bit more room for the lots to widen and space the houses and septics out a little bit more appropriately, and allowed for a slightly smaller detention infiltration basin in the rear of lot 3 and a portion of lot 2. The system that we're going to be designed based off of is kind of a low maintenance and low impact. If you've seen around Rhode Island, they've tried to implement this rather than having catch basins, which require machinery to empty out the catch basins and the manholes. This is a greener design where we are just dumping water through the system of a paved waterway at the end of the cul-de-sac. And it will flow into a sediment forebay, which will collect any sediment and debris, and then overflow into a grass swale before it enters into the infiltration basin. And during the storm, we'll have exfiltration where a good portion of the water will actually sift through the ground. But during large peak storms, the overflow towards the rear will flow directly into the wetland, which is a design point for all stormwater management practices. And the design goal is to reduce or equal the control flow that's getting into the wetland, which we meet all those standards. In regards to the open space, during the first conversations we had back in, I believe it was July or August, if my memory serves me right, a lot of the neighbors were concerned with wildlife, the use of that land, being able to walk and enjoy the property. And we thought, it's additional land that it doesn't have a major benefit to the subdivision, as it's unusable for, we're not going to be able to build on it. We're not going to be able to put any growth in there. It's conservation land essentially because of the wetlands. And we thought because of the land trust is just to the south, it'd be an appropriate place where we go, all right, well, we donate more land. It allows neighbors to still use the land if they want to walk on it with the permission of the town, and ease of wildlife so that in the future, nothing else happens.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, before we open Mr. Andrade up to questions of the board, I just have a couple further questions for Mr. Andrade. Mr. Andrade, there's a brook that runs through the property, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And those wetlands have been identified in the central portion of the property, correct?
Yes, they have.
And based on your analysis, would I be correct in stating that there'll be no negative environmental impact based on the fact that the new construction will be occurring beyond the 50-foot wetland buffer and the 200-foot buffer from the brook that I just referenced? Is that correct?
Absolutely. That is correct.
And based on your education and experience, is it your opinion that there will be no significant negative environmental impact from the proposed development as shown on the final plans with the conditions that have been recommended by planning staff?
That is my opinion, yes.
Also, with respect to proposed lot 1, that has the existing house, correct?
Yes,
Okay, and proposed lots 2 and 4 meet all dimensional regulations as contained in Article 5 of the zoning ordinance, is that correct?
yes, they do.
And you're not aware of any physical constraints to constructability relative to these lots, is that correct?
Correct.
Proposed lot 5 has no street access. This is the lot that we are proposing become a portion of the Cumberland Land Trust, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it has access through a property that's presently owned by the land trust, and that's Assessor's Plat 42 lot 127.
That is correct, yes.
And based on your education and experience, can you give an opinion to a reasonable degree of certainty that the subdivision as proposed will not result in the creation of individual lots with such physical constraints to development that the building on those lots, according to pertinent regulations and building standards, would be impracticable?
That is correct.
And based on the engineering plans that have been submitted, you can provide the opinion that they're strike that. I'm all set with that. And Chris, finally, let me ask you, with respect to adequate and permanent physical access to the public street, if you could just briefly describe for the record the access for lot 1.
For lot 1. So the lot 1, which is the existing house that abuts Diamond Hill Road, which is currently already in use. It's a viable house, actually a really nice, beautiful home, perfectly usable, perfect access with the driveway, and it's been in use for years.
And lots 2 to 4 will have access, adequate frontage, and access to an extension of Green Meadow Lane. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as we just referenced, lot 5, the proposed gift to the land trust will not be landlocked based on the land trust's ownership of AP 42 lot 127, correct?
That is also correct.
And based on your education and experience, can you provide an opinion to a reasonable degree of certainty that all lots within the subdivision will have adequate and permanent physical access to a public street other than lot 5, which will be gifted to the town?
That is correct as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing else for Mr. Andrade. He's certainly open to questions of the board, and we would also like to present Mr. McLean, and I would defer to the board whether they'd like to hear from Mr. McLean first or question Mr. Andrade. Thank you.
Okay, typically what I do is, as each expert testifies, I prefer to have the board members ask the individual questions to him right at that point rather than wait till the end of the end. So at this point, if there's anybody on the board has any questions for Mr. Andrade?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
this is
Butler.
Mr. Butler, I had a quick question. Just because it's something I don't remember ever seeing before, so I'm just wondering how it gets handled. It looks like on the northern part of Lot 4, there's a couple of existing encroachments. So there's a swimming pool that it looks like comes over onto Lot 4. There's a fence on one of the lots that encroaches. So I'm just wondering how that gets handled. Is that just grandfathered in? Do those abutters have to move those things? I just never really seen those kind of encroachments before, so I was curious.
No, that's an excellent question. At this point, I think Ms. Salvatore, you may have something to contribute at this point.
Yes, and I'm just trying to get to exactly what Mr. Butler is referring to.
I mean, I can share the plans if you think
Sheet
that'll be.
4. I'm on
Sheet
sheet
4.
4 of the plans. And up on the northern, so the top of the sheet, over kind of on the right-hand side, there's an existing pool.
Thank you. Yes. So those encroachments are not a matter for this board. There may be some civil type action that could be taken based on time periods, but I'm not going to start giving legal advice. But yeah, those encroachments do not come before the board. If the survey is correct, it's a class 1 survey, these lots can be divided as proposed.
Thank you.
Anyone else has a question?
Mr.
Board.
Chair,
Yes,
I think Mr. Resnick made a slipped. He referred to a donation to the town at the end of his statement. I just want to give him an opportunity to clarify that.
Yes, it's a lot 5, which would be provided to the land trust.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Jonathan, in some towns, the land trust is actually an agency of the town. So perhaps Mr. Resnick was thinking that in Cumberland, they are a private organization. So
Yes.
just to be clear.
Excuse me, and I appreciate that. I just had a matter in Richmond last night, and that's the way they do it down in Richmond. So yes, I misspoke, and clearly it's a private nonprofit. So thank you for that, Mr. Stevens. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
board have any other questions at this point for Mr. Andrade?
I have a question, Greg.
Mr. Scown?
Yeah, it was mentioned that the open space lot would be usable by the abutters, especially the ones that are along Wampum Trail, excuse me. And there doesn't seem to be any access through Wampum Trail except through somebody's personal lot. So the only access that the abutters in that particular area have is to walk through Diamond Hill Road around to Thomas Layton to the land trust property on Thomas Layton in order to access that property. So I just want to make it clear that it's not a convenient situation. I mean, obviously they can access it, but I just want to make it clear that I don't think it's convenient.
Thank you, Mr. Scown. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I wanted to ask the engineer what the distance is between the house and the retention basin, holding pond, I forget what we're calling them these days. And the distance from the house to the basin, and whether or not it was considered that that could be moved farther north into the area of Lot 4.
Yep, so Chris Andrade here. So the distance to the basin is 57 feet from the house. And the reason we can't use lot 4 is if you look Sylvia Brook, the 200-foot buffer from Sylvia's Brook actually runs along and into lot 4 and basically where the encroachment. So almost all of the back of lot 4 would not be able to be used for the infiltration basin.
There's the buffer.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Salvatore,
I just want to add to that. This is a subdivision, so the house in theory could be moved to anywhere within the building envelope. Maybe Glenn could show where that is using your arrow. The dotted line, it's a
Right.
very large building envelope. So
Right.
depending on what DEM says, in terms of where the house is relative to the infiltration basin, I just want to be clear that the building envelope is very large. Thank you.
And you got if I'm correct, the regulations changed where it's a 50-foot buffer from foundations, correct?
That's something that we are proposing.
Oh, so it hasn't been approved, okay.
The only thing that happened that you heard tonight was there was a cantilevered second floor. And right now the zoning official is interpreting that as the setback but we will be proposing that it be to the foundation as it has been in the past.
I think if you can move that house away from the retention pond at all, would probably be a better design for that lot. And I don't know if you can, if there is, if it's required that it be farther from the building next door, based on what Ms. Salvatore was talking about. But it just seemed 50 feet isn't really that far away for a backyard.
well, it appears as though if it was possible to move the house, you probably would have to look at the septic system to see how much that either could be needed to be moved or can it stay in that place? I'm not quite sure. If you look at that.
Yeah.
No, I can see that. It would depend upon the positioning of the septic system.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kept 57 feet. I know the regulation, I think, says it has to be at least 50 feet. Gave an additional 7. And, when final design comes through with the actual homeowner, if there's availability to move it forward, I'm sure they probably would, but we're showing kind of almost worst case of what we could expect. So.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because it is my understanding when you're showing the locations of the houses, it's only kind of a preliminary guesstimate as to where they would be located. I don't think they get locked in for that specific location. If for some reason, even construction wise, they encountered something that they needed to, move the foundation forward, or maybe even, north, south, or whatever, that would be locked down at a later point.
Yeah, it may depend upon where they put their perk holes and see, where the septic systems could go and whether or not they perked areas farther back in the lot.
Agreed. Anyone else have questions at this point? Okay, we'll go on to the next expert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask that Doug McLean be promoted to the panel if he hasn't already.
I am here.
Good evening, Mr. McLean, and if you could please provide to the board a description of your education and professional experience and your present vocation.
Sure. My name is Doug McLean. I'm at 54 12th Street in Providence. I've worked as a professional planner in the state of Rhode Island for the past 14 years. I received a master's degree in planning from the University of Massachusetts. I tested for and successfully passed the American Institute of Certified Planners exam in 2009 and have maintained my planning certification to date. My background includes a mix of private sector and public sector planning work, and I currently serve as the principal planner for the city of Cranston. My resume is enclosed at the tail end of my written report, which was submitted back in July, and that provides additional details if there are any questions.
And Mr. Chairman, based on that testimony, I would ask that Mr. McLean be qualified as an expert in his field as a professional planner and land use expert. Mr. McLean, in connection with your work on this development, did you review the entire application materials?
Yes, I did.
And have you reviewed all applicable sections of the Cumberland zoning ordinance?
Yes, I have.
Have you also reviewed all applicable sections of Cumberland's land development and subdivision regulations?
Yes, I have.
And have you had the chance to review applicable sections of the Cumberland Comprehensive Plan?
Yes, I have.
And have you reviewed Rhode Island General Laws 452360 pertaining to the required findings under state law relative to major subdivisions?
Yes, I am familiar with that.
And have you also reviewed GIS data relative to the town of Cumberland?
Yes, I have.
And if you could please share with the board the data that you collected and the analysis that you performed relative to your work on this project.
Surely. I submitted a written report back in July when this matter was first heard. My goal tonight is not to provide oral testimony with that level of detail, just to provide an overview, but I'm certainly open to questions if there are any regarding to the details that are in the report. But essentially the summary of my findings, and I'll provide a sense of how I derived this, but the summary finding is that the proposed waivers for lot proportion on all of the lots that require them are justified and appropriate based on my review of compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood and based on the mitigation elements included in the application. To begin, I'd say that the need for waivers in this case stems from several factors that are all related to the unique and specific characteristics of this property. The full property itself is elongated and not proportional as a starting point. There's a need to orient the frontage lots on Diamond Hill and their existing dwellings with frontage on Diamond Hill. There's the need to design the remaining lots around the wetland and buffer areas, as well as the need to design them around an extension of a right-of-way of Green Meadow Lane. These factors all create unique and specific circumstances that create the need for waivers for lot proportionality from the 3 lots that still require, the 4 lots that require proportionality waivers. I have conducted a neighborhood analysis using the Town of Cumberland's GIS data portal. And this neighborhood analysis has compared the general characteristics of the proposed lots and the proposed homes against the general characteristics of the existing lots and homes in the surrounding neighborhood. I would note the surrounding neighborhood in residential lots laid out in the mid-20th century. The individual lots are generally anywhere from 1/3 of an acre to 1/2 an acre large. There are lots that were built before the requirements of the current R1 zone, which now mandates a minimum lot size of 40,000 square feet. So essentially a little less than an acre. So in terms of lot size, the lots that are being proposed are 1 acre large or slightly larger than that. The surrounding neighborhood is generally 1/3 to 1/2 an acre. So in general, our lots are twice the size of the surrounding neighborhood, and that relates to the density. Our lots are half as dense as the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the space between buildings and the setbacks, from property lines. Our lots in general are providing more space between dwellings and more space to adjacent property lines. One other observation from my neighborhood analysis is in terms of the footprints of homes, generally the existing homes in the area, range in size. Some are more modest and provide a smaller footprint, but generally they still meet the lot coverage percentage calculation of 10% or less. The footprints of the proposed lots for this application, the houses may be a bit bigger. However, because the lots are significantly larger, the individual lot coverage is still incompatible, and in many cases is actually far below the lot coverage percentage of the surrounding neighborhood. So again, in terms of the massing and intensity of buildings on this space, it's generally less dense, and the massing and intensity of building scale is less than the surrounding neighborhood. So that is a summary of my neighborhood analysis. I'd like to give just a couple finer points on my analysis of mitigation elements, as well as analysis of comprehensive plan. Please feel free to interrupt if people have questions as I go. The proposed homes, as far as mitigation elements, are being located within the setback areas. They're meeting all of the required setbacks, and in some cases, it's the rear setback that we're making sure we're conscious of. I would note that the applicant has identified buffer areas on the plan. You'll see those buffer areas highlighted in green on sheet 8 of the plan set. They're specifically along the northern and southern property boundaries. And those buffer areas are areas in which all existing trees will be maintained. And there will be additional new trees planted, new evergreen trees planted as a commitment from the applicant to create a visual screen. This is intended, you can see on the screen right now, the green areas. This is intended as a mitigation element to provide a means of a visual screen and provide some privacy for the existing abutters in these areas, as well as a privacy for the proposed new dwellings. This is not a requirement for standard residential development, but in this case, the applicant is providing this as a means to help mitigate, to be a good neighbor. In general, we think that this mitigation is seen as further justification for the lot proportionality and for the development of these specific lots as proposed. Another mitigation element is based on the feedback received at the first hearing. The applicant is gifting a lot to the town's land trust for conservation purposes. This action further reduces the amount of disturbance to the overall site, and it provides a public amenity that can be shared by the neighboring community. And I would also note as another mitigation element, although the new regulations allow for the stormwater basin to be located 25 feet from an adjacent property line, essentially a property line external to our project, on our plan, we're locating that more internal to the site. We're recognizing a 57-foot distance between the drainage basin and the nearest adjacent property line. So essentially that's more than twice as much as what the code would allow. And we're maintaining that in consistency with the initial plans and consistency with the original regulations of a 50-foot distance from adjacent property lines. I'll just make one final note. I have reviewed the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan does reference, the circumstances for this proposal. The comprehensive plan designates this property as having a low density residential designation within the future land use map. The proposed density and design of the subdivision is well within the thresholds established by the comprehensive plan's future land use map. Additionally, there's specific reference to the Diamond Hill neighborhood on page 16 of the comprehensive plan. And it states, while suitable for additional development, density must be limited to ensure adequate well water supply and use state-of-the-art on-site wastewater treatment systems. It's my finding that the proposed density and design of the subdivision is consistent with this language from the comprehensive plan. and that the new dwellings will be connected to public water as opposed to well, so preserving any well water resources for those around, and will have associated OWTS or on-site wastewater treatment systems that will meet all of the current Rhode Island DEM standards. So that provides a summary of my general notes. I would say that the town's code does allow for the planning board to provide waivers when it finds there is justification. And the language around the justification of that is that if the literal enforcement of the regulations, in this case, the lot proportions, would be impractical and exact an undue hardship because of the peculiar conditions pertaining to the land in question, whereas the waiver would be in the interest of good planning practices and or good design as evidenced by consistency with the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. It is my finding that the waivers and the proposal as presented do meet that hardship standard and are a good case of good planning practices and design and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. That concludes my general summary, and I'm available for questions if there are any.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, before opening Mr. McLean up to questioning from the board, Mr. McLean, the testimony that you've provided today, the findings that you've made, and the opinions that you've rendered, based on your education and experience, are you providing this testimony and opinions to a reasonable degree of planning certainty?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions at this time for Mr. McLean.
You're muted.
Doing that.
Okay, muted.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. McQueen? I do have a comment for Mr. Andrade, and that's just on sheet 6, the typical section. There's a dimension missing, something you might want to, it's that 12-inch berm on the left side of the section. Just something that, fell through the cracks that you just need to, tidy up, that's all.
So if you look, it's underneath, it's called out as a Cape Cod berm, 12-inch wide with a 2.5.
Oh, okay, but it does, like on the right-hand side, it shows the dimension of 12 inches.
Yeah, sorry, I can add it above too.
It doesn't matter, I mean, whatever looks, whatever works. I just noticed that you had 12 inches on one side and not the other, it's,
Yep, that's fine.
yeah. That's all. So do we have another expert?
No, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our testimony. If I could just briefly end our presentation before we open it up to members of the public. Again, we are asking for a positive vote this evening from the planning board with respect to our combined master and preliminary plan, as well as the performance and maintenance guarantees that we've discussed. We've reviewed the staff report. We have no objection to any of the conditions that have been contained therein. And we are more than available to answer any questions the public may have. Thank you very much.
Okay, also including the waivers, right?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Salvatore.
just a question. Did you vote to combine the master and preliminary at any previous meeting? If you didn't, I just want to make sure that that's one of your votes.
Okay, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
That'll be at the July meeting, right?
I don't know. I don't think you did, but I just want to make sure that gets on the record as a vote once you get to it.
I don't believe it was voted on. I think we continued before any votes were done.
If I got this correct, Mr. Modica, on your memo on the summary, it says waivers from the land development and subdivision regulations, approval of the combined master preliminary plan, and approval of the performance maintenance guarantees. Did I miss something here as far as the, right here, approval to combine master and preliminary plan. That's above, the sentence above it.
Yeah, and I'm checking the minutes.
Okay. Because it's included in your summary. It says the applicant is requesting approval of the combined master preliminary. But I don't see anything with the,
No, the only vote was to continue.
Okay.
The meeting.
so really.
Thank you for pointing that out. So I would amend my request to also include a motion to approve the combining of master and preliminary. And also, to the extent that the board were to give us a positive vote this evening, we would request that we be allowed to proceed to final administratively. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, at this point in time, I will open up the floor. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to have any questions answered or have any comments at this point, I'd ask you to use your little button to click on the little hand. And also, please give us your name and your address for the record.
So, okay, Mr. Chair, we have 9 attendees, and Patty Fulton has raised her hand.
Okay.
I'm gonna allow it to talk.
Hi, my name is Pat Fulton, 23 Thomas Layton Boulevard. I am one of the abutters. I have a couple questions of Mr. Andrade. First, who maintains and manages the infiltration basin after it's built?
The infiltration basin will be managed under a homeowners association. And so once the homeowners association is created, we come up with an operation and maintenance plan and package, and that gets given to them. And it's recorded, and they have to follow the maintenance within that.
I guess my follow-up question to that would be, what if these group of people do not, are not in agreement and do not maintain? What is the impact to those of us around the area? Because I would assume that if an infiltration basin is not maintained, the impact is overflow is going to happen either into the brook or into the abutters' backyards, neither which would be great.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Salvatore?
I can answer that. On all homeowners association agreements, I review those. And in those homeowners association agreements, it requires that if the basin is not maintained, the town goes in, maintains it, and then puts a lien against the properties.
Okay.
Not only do I review the homeowners association agreement, but the public works director will review the operation and maintenance agreement on the basins as well, and any other common elements that must be maintained by the HOA.
Dumb question. How do they access the infiltration basin once the houses are built? Any equipment, how would you get it in there? Dumb question, but since the
There's no such
infiltration
thing as a
basin
dumb
area looks like
question.
it's landlocked.
Well, the homeowners association has to maintain it, so there would be access through the properties because it's their basin.
So on the map that you're scrolling, would that be then through the cul-de-sac that there's an access point?
Yep. So if you look, there's a gravel access just north of the sediment forebay. And that is for the purpose of a utility vehicle to essentially park there. And there's width of the easement on the southern portion for additional access for if they need to get a truck in or any other vehicles, along with the 8-foot wide opening at the fence in the back to get in there.
Would that negatively impact any of the butters on the other side of Thomas Layton? How many feet is there between that area and?
Oh, it's Yeah, so it's,
well within side.
yeah, so it's the pond is 57 feet. I believe the fence is like 40 something feet from there. I can get an exact dimension if you wait a second, but yeah, it's a substantial distance between the buffer.
And the distance of the infiltration basin to the property lines of the abutters along Thomas Layton,
It's about 57 feet.
57 feet?
Yep.
So about equidistance between us and the people that would be owning these properties, is
Yeah,
what I'm hearing you say.
essentially, yeah.
Follow-up question on that is, you talked about the infiltration basin and trying to make sure that there's no issue with the brook and the wetlands. Has this infiltration design and the sedimentary bay been reviewed by a civil engineer with a background in water, wastewater, and a PE background?
Yes, it has. And it meets all the standards of the stormwater management handbook and run through analysis with HydroCAD for flows at peak storm rates.
Okay, have they looked back at the data with the one storm that happened probably 15 years ago, 100-year storm where there was significant flooding in this area?
Yeah, so that was you're talking about the 500-year storm that kind of,
Yes,
yeah. So
killed
that,
everybody.
yeah, so we designed to a 100-year storm
Okay.
practice, and that's what the handbook design is.
Okay, that's fair. And has there been any look at the possible implications of negative impact to the abutters, or an anticipation of negative impact to the abutters with this type of development as far as drainage and or any other disruption of the aquifer, any of the water flowing underneath the surface and not just the river and the stream that runs through there?
Yeah, so we don't design against the aquifer, so we're not implementing any practices that would negatively impact it. The sediment forebay, the design for that is to kind of collect anything that we don't want going into the aquifer, and is to be cleaned out regularly so that we don't get anything washing into the groundwater. And so that's part of the stormwater management handbook. And go ahead.
Have there been any perceived negative impacts or possible negative impacts identified to the abutters?
No, there's no impacts.
Can you tell me that again and assure us all that? Because I think that's what people are worried about. I'm not against development. And I'll say that very clearly. I had been married to a civil engineer with a PE license, and his background was site development, water and wastewater. I am not adverse to it, but doing it the right way, making sure that not only do you not affect the property you're building in a negative way, but you don't affect the butters in the surrounding properties. There are cases that have been in North Attleboro where Blackberry Way was the houses built around it were under sewage because of bad design. And the town had to step in and then put in sewer, and it was literally a shitstorm. People had raw sewage up in their backyards. So
based on our design and our design practice, there's no, we are not designing for any negative impacts on any abutters or negative impacts within the development.
well, I'm not saying that you design for negative impact, but are there any anticipated negative impacts? Nobody designs for negative. Hopefully.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how to answer that question. Yeah, it's kind of too open-ended where I can't foresee what happens in the future with anybody who goes in there, but we design based on the standards and the practices of the stormwater management handbook, the town's design regulations, and we've met all the design criteria.
So you don't anticipate there would be negative impact to the abutters?
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If anyone else would like to speak, you click the raise your hand icon. And we have Scott and Doreen Sanford.
How you doing?
Good, we can hear you.
Okay, just give you my brief background. Scott and Doreen Sanford, 18 Wampum Trail, Assessors Plat 42 Lot 93. We're the lot right up in the northwest corner. Lived here all my life. I know the conditions of the property, and my main concern is of this project is the impact of our quality of life. For the developer to get maximum development in this area, putting 3 houses in, and making maximum profit on lots that really, in my opinion, can't fit 3 houses. I'm concerned about the open space donation. Us here on the Wampum Trail side, we can't access that open space without cutting through someone's yard, or we have to walk all the way around Diamond Hill Road and up Thomas Layton to get in there. So there's no access for us to get to that.
Plus, it's not buildable.
It's definitely not a buildable lot. I know it's not intended to be, but the other concern I have is with the wildlife situation that we have here. Over to the west of the site, you'll notice there's a pond at Green Meadow Lane, the entrance. A lot of the wildlife moves in between the pond and the brook, and they cut through the field. There's plenty of stuff, living in burrows and whatnot out there also. Once the houses are put up and there's people put fences and whatnot, there's no way that wildlife will be able to move in between the 2 bodies of water that they're used to doing now. I've seen plenty of deer back there and whatnot, but that's another concern of us. Concern with the maintenance of the sediment forebay and infiltration basin. I just think if someone owns that house where that sediment basin is out in the front there, and it's going to have this gravel driveway sitting next to it, I think that's going to be pretty unsightly for them. And I was reading through the maintenance section on sheet, I don't know what it is, sheet 7, about having to maintain that sediment forebay twice every 4 months, make sure there's nothing in it. And then the other one is to be inspected yearly or after twice a year or after a large event. I know that's not going to happen, even though you have an HOA that'll say it's going to happen. People aren't going to be concerned or even know what that is. The average, homeowner with that sediment forebay situation. Also, in the wintertime, when you plow snow over it's going to block that. Who's going to be responsible to keep that open so the water flows down? Another issue with the drainage system, it's the easement goes right in between 2 properties, right along the property line. Who's going to prevent them from building a fence on their property line and blocking access to the basin from the street? That's another concern. Okay. Next point would be what Patty was talking about, the effects of the water table. Guess we'll be concerned about that. Concerned about increase in traffic in our neighborhood, since Wampum Trail will be the primary access to this. After and during construction, we're going to have to put up with all kinds of trucks and equipment coming through here. They're going to be tracking mud. I know they show a construction entrance at the beginning of the project, but I've seen these before. They put them in there and then and then they get all full of mud and they never maintain the things. So the people who live along Green Meadow Lane and Wampum, right at the beginning, there's gonna be all kinds of mud, and I know it's always an issue trying to get the sweeper back in there to try to sweep that all the time. So we're gonna be living with mud and dust for a while this is going on. And again, I know that's part of construction and whatnot, but also our street is not in the greatest of shape. It's basically an oil and gravel base with a 2-inch top on it that was done about 20 years or 25 years ago, and the end of our street's falling apart as it is. So I would think the town might be concerned with all this heavy traffic coming over here, coming down the road. We also have a lot of kids that play here too, so that's another concern. Of course, I'd be against granting any waivers for anything. It's basically just a shame to lose this pristine piece of property to 3 houses just clustered in there that they don't fit. If you look at the building envelope on the middle lot there, lot number 3, you're telling me the building setback line goes all the way around the property there. But if you look at the 200-foot riverbank buffer, that's actually, you can't build past that. So you can't use that, the setback lines as they are. I know there's some stupid law that the state passed saying you can include that in buildable area, and I know that Cumberland doesn't reflect that, but you're saying that because the state says it, that you can follow it, but you can't, where your infiltration basin is. I see that the outline of that basin has to follow along the wetland flags, and they can't build there. So what makes that any different? You can say that's buildable area, but once there's the basin in there and drainage easement, how can you use that as buildable area where you have an easement on it and a basin? So I disagree with how those calculations are. I know the state law says it, but it's just that house, you don't have much room to move that house around on lot 3. And same thing with lot 4. That one's in there pretty tight too. You can't move that thing much at all from where it is. If you move it further to the west, the lot gets narrower as you go. So basically this plan you have here now is the same. It's the same concept you had back in July, except you shifted some lines around, you moved some basins around, and now you got the land trust involved. So basically you're quieting them down by giving them the land they want. But what good is it to us if we can't use that land? It's the concept here. You shortened up the road, you move some stuff around, but it's basically the same thing we looked at in July, just moved around a little bit. That's the way I look at it. I wouldn't mind if they were able to just build maybe one house back there instead of trying to maximize everything for the developer. So that's really what it comes down to. Is it's not, I know the word hardship had been used before. And I have a feeling it's still being used in this case. I don't know why we should have to suffer as abutters at the expense of, at the profit of someone else. And I guess that's basically all I have to say about it. So I'm definitely against the project, and hope some of my other neighbors that are on here too feel the same way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Motor, is there anyone else with their hands raised?
No, I don't see anyone. So if anyone else would like to speak, hit the icon, the raise your hand symbol. No, there are. Here's one. Combs family, I'm going to promote you to panelist. I think you're a panelist now, Combs family. Can you hear us?
It's Steve Coombs, 14 Momentum Lane. I just wanted to argue that I watched the whole presentation and that I didn't see anything mentioned about the wildlife impact. I want to know if there's possibly any studies that was done relative to this project.
Mr. Combs, could you give us your name and address? I got your name. Could you give us your address too for the record?
It's number 14 Momentum Lane.
Okay, thank you.
And do you want me to repeat what I said?
No, I heard that you're concerned about the wildlife in the area and the impacts on the wildlife.
Yes, the rear of my house faces that property or parcel. And over the years, I see significant wildlife moving from Thomas Lane through Momentum Lane and across Momentum Lane to the woods. And most recently saw a coyote. We see deer often, other animals, ducks. And I just want to know what kind of study was performed to.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I can ask the engineer, Mr. Andre, to respond if he could.
Yeah. So per the regulations, it's not like an in-depth study that we have to do in regards to the environmental impact, but there is, with the 3-lot subdivision, it's considered minimal to no impact on wildlife.
Is there a study available that was done on this
Not that
particular one?
no, we did not do a study for this project
How come?
because it's not part of the regulations.
I may answer, it's not required by state law, local regulation, or the ordinance.
Is it going to be taken under consideration?
The board will certainly discuss it anyway at this point, okay? But we always, I can tell you this much, we always rely on the experts because we on the board are not experts. So we rely on their expert testimony, okay? And the
Is there gonna
guidance
be a
from
wildlife
our
expert
planning
brought in?
staff. I'm sorry?
Is there going to be a wildlife expert brought in on this?
I don't know at this point.
Well, but Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
just want to be clear, it's not required by the regulations. If the neighbors had brought some evidence forth that there is an issue, then perhaps it might be further reviewed, but there's been no evidence put on the record about any significant environmental impacts. In fact, I think the applicant testified in depth about the lack of environmental impact.
What do you want to say?
Mr. Combs, you still there? Okay,
I am here, sorry.
that's okay.
I only heard part of that last question I had. Question I asked.
Ms. Salvatore, would you like to repeat it, your
Well,
response?
what I said is that, and it's been stated by the applicant and the applicant's attorney, there is nothing that's required by either state statute or local ordinance or regulation that requires an in-depth study of environmental impacts as to habitat. If there was something brought up by a neighbor in terms of evidence of a significant impact, then the board would consider that, but I have not heard anything brought up. In fact, the applicant's representatives testified that there is no significant environmental impact.
Didn't they say no, there was no study done, performed?
There is
No,
no
that's-
requirement for a study to be done.
Okay. So would the neighbors be available to produce or provide some type of impact? At this point?
Well, I mean, this application has been pending for about 6 months. So it's up to the board, but
Again, and I'd just like to raise, there's absolutely no requirement, state law, regulations, or ordinance. So to the extent that something was raised, there's again, respectfully, it would be outside the authority of the board to consider it. We've also provided an expert opinion that there's no negative environmental impacts based on the plans that have been provided, based on the stormwater management plan that's been discussed. And we can speak to those issues, and we've discussed those issues at length. They're part of the application package, but specifically as it relates to wildlife and habitat, there's just no regulation, state law or ordinance that would apply to this. So I respectfully, I understand the concern, but I don't think it would be appropriate to allow an opportunity for such an expert report or anything to be provided to the board. As the town's attorney just referenced, this matter's been pending for 6 months. And again, irrespective of what's put forth, it's not one of the findings that's required for state law to approve a development of this nature. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I
Ms.
just want to
Avatar.
be clear as to my advice. If something was brought up regarding habitat in the last 6 months, I would say that the board definitely has the authority to investigate that. But nothing has been brought up by any neighbors. In fact, even tonight, I mean, it's just a observation about, I don't want to minimize it, but you know, certain observations that we have in all of our neighborhoods. I don't, you know, so I just want to be clear. It's not in the regulations. However, if there was an expert opinion produced by a neighbor, there might be some investigation done by the planning board, but there hasn't been that. And that's my position.
And also, Mr. Chairman, if I could briefly add, if we take a look at Rhode Island Department of Environmental maps, there are no rare species located on the subject development per RIDEM. And because there's no rare species as contained on RIDEM's maps, there are no required mitigation. So that's another thing that the board should consider, that DEM has done due diligence in that regard and has not identified this area as an area which would require specific mitigation, and that's state law, and that's within the purview of the Department of Environmental Management. Thank you.
So I could go to the Department of Environmental Management and ask for a study.
I'm not sure of the answer to that. I think you know, Mr. Resnick, I haven't looked at the at the GIS maps, but if there's nothing indicating a habitat issue, this is, you know, it's just not relevant to this particular application at this point.
Again, what I want to make clear and state is that this board relies on all expert testimony when we make our decisions, and that's, you know, includes the engineers, the planners, et cetera, and even also the attorneys as far as any legalities involved with the project. We rely on their expert testimony to guide us, because we on the board are not experts in these fields. So I just want to make that really clear. That's about the way this board approaches any project of this nature. We have to rely on the experts that provide the testimony, and also the town staff, the Director of Public Works, and so on. I hope that helps a little bit.
I'm not sure, but thanks.
Okay. Thank you.
Do
Do you have any other questions?
Well, did I read it? Did I hear him correctly saying that a study was performed?
That a study was performed? No, a study wasn't performed. The attorney made it, Mr. Resnick made it very clear about what the requirements would be. And it's not a requirement to provide a study of that kind for a project like this. And he also stated regulations from, I believe it was the DEM at this point too. Am I correct, Mr. Resnick?
Yeah, so what I had referenced as the last part there was that DEM does do an analysis of areas that are identified that should have specific mitigation areas relative to the identification of rare species. And this development is not contained in any of those maps. So while we don't need to present information relative to the board, relative to this application, I just wanted to note that DEM, who is the regulatory authority for identifying areas that need specific mitigation requirements or mitigation measures, this is not one of them.
Okay. So I could go to DEM and ask them that.
You certainly could.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, Mr. Combs?
No, thank you.
Okay,
Awesome.
thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions, Mr. Modica?
Yes, Scott and Doreen Sanford have their hand raised.
Okay.
And they're coming in as a panelist. So Scott, you are a panelist. You just need to unmute.
Okay. I just want to say that back in July, we did bring up the wildlife issue with the board when I was there in person the first time. And some of the board members did express a little bit of concern about that part of it. So it was brought up. I know there's no expert testimony on it. I do have, in the past, I had a wildlife camera on one of my trees in the back, and I have plenty of video of all kinds of stuff back there at night. And my neighbor, Mr. Ed DeRozier, also had concerns on that too, because he owns the pond. And, you know, the major concern is the wildlife being able to go in between the pond and the brook, as they naturally do. All that's going to get disrupted. I know there's no state law or statute, but it is a concern of ours and something I would, hope that in your minds you consider that when you're voting on this. Oh, I had one other question. I know in town they just reinstituted the Conservation Commission. I want to know if that commission has any oversight on this project, and will they be reviewing any of this, or that's the other question I had, the Conservation Commission.
I think that's a question for the director.
Yes, I had muted again. I asked for Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, no, this project, it predates the reenactment of the Conservation Commission. So going forward, they will be reviewing master plans, but this project before that.
Okay, I guess that's what I wanted to know, because there has been a big story in town about, overdevelopment of sensitive areas. So I felt this was one of those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm all
Thank
set
you.
for now.
Thank you. Mr. Modica?
If anyone else would like to speak, please click the raise your hand button. Give them a couple seconds here. Mr. Sanford would like to come back. Those. Okay, so Scott, you're back.
Hello?
Okay,
Yes.
It's shutting off. It's cutting out.
we're back.
Okay.
I just want to know from Mr. Modica if there was any emails received with comments to this newest meeting.
I did not receive any email comments. I've been checking email throughout the meeting.
Yeah, you know, I know you said that it was, when I emailed you earlier, that it was official notification wasn't required for this, but I think that has a big part in why we don't have a lot of comments tonight.
I don't know. They're
A lot of
older
people, some of the people around me forgot about it,
Older.
and there's some older folks that live around here, and I know you said it was, you didn't have to notify again, but I think we would probably had a little better participation tonight if it had been.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms.
just for
Salvatore.
the record, there are 8 different people or families in the audience. Not all of them have raised their hand.
I wish some of my neighbors, if you're out there, if you
They
you had a comment, or you could raise your hand and at least say something. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a
Mr.
problem.
Modica.
Not everybody's.
Yes. I'm gonna promote Jeffrey Frazier to panelist. Jeffrey, you've been promoted. You just need to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. My name's Jeffrey Fraser with my wife Nancy. We live at 14 Wampum Trail, which abuts the property to the north side. I just wanted to tone in that I agree. Mr. Sanford is basically reiterated pretty much all my concerns also. I do understand that Mr. Menard wants to, develop his property. And I'm a contractor myself for over 45 years. And to me, it just seems like we're really trying to shoehorn these homes in this property to maximize his profit in an area that has been basically a wildlife area for many, many years. I've been here 20 years myself, Mr. Sanford, his whole life. Many of the neighbors around here are very long-term neighbors. And we do have a lot of wildlife that roams through the property from north to south, to east to west, and cuts across all our properties. We do think it would be a huge impact on that. And knowing that the town has tried to promote open space and to keep areas for, life species and animals as such, it just seems like we're just letting developers come in and overrun these open spaces without any concern of that. So other than that, I just wanted to chime in. I am opposed, my wife and I are opposed to the property as it stands at this point. And we appreciate your time in this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there are still some other folks out there who haven't raised your hand, so this is your opportunity. If you'd like to raise your hand and speak. And we do have someone who just has the initial T being promoted to panelist. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, here we go. Hi, my name is Tony Pina. I live at number 8 Wampum Trail with my wife, Lynn. I want to just kind of back up what Scott has been saying and also with Jeff. I believe it would be in the best interest for our neighborhood as well as the town to allow 2 houses in this development, not the 3 that are proposed. As you all have experienced, the increased traffic in town just keeps getting worse. During peak driving times, it takes me a long time to turn onto Diamond Hill Road due to congestion. This was not the case just 10 or 20 years ago. I completely understand why folks want to live in town. It's for the same reasons why I moved here 38 years ago. I do not understand why we have to overdevelop every inch of the town at the neighborhood's expense. Why do we have to allow so many exceptions in order for the builders to maximize the profits that Chef was just alluding to? Why do we have to squeeze 3 large houses into a known sensitive wetlands area that serves as a watershed area for not only the reservoir, but for Schofield Farm well sites? And another point I want to put out here, if you look at page 23, it clearly shows how the houses are shoehorned into the area. The proposed house lot on number 3 will have a large chain link fence surrounding a stormwater infiltration basin in the backyard. Why would you build a 4-bedroom house that would certainly have kids with this basin in the backyard? I believe there is no compelling need to allow exemptions and waivers in order to build 3 houses. I urge the board to allow 2 house lots, and this will result in a nice fit for the neighborhood. The 2 house lots will not require the exemptions and waivers and will coexist nicely in our neighborhood. And the wildlife in this area will be happy, and there will be less traffic in our area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, if anyone else who is an attendee would like to speak, this is last call. And Mr. Chair, no one is raising their hand.
Thank you. At this point in time, I will close the public hearing at 8:32 p.m. and restrict comments to the board. I would like to hear some responses from the applicant's representatives relative to a number of the questions raised regarding the concerns that they have relative. I know we've already gone over the wildlife questions and so on. But I know there were questions about the easement and also the drainage impacts and so on. So I would just like them to respond to the questions that were raised by the neighbors.
Mr. Chair, yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman, I mean, as it relates to maintenance issues that were raised by the community relative to stormwater management infiltration basins and the stormwater basin. Again, there's an HOA that's going to be created. It's going to have a maintenance plan. There's going to be fees associated with it. It's a contractual document. The houses will be bought subject to those requirements. And to the extent that they're not performed, as was noted by the town's attorney, the town will have the ability to lien the property, perform the work, and charge the HOA or the individual property owners. So the concept that the maintenance is not going to be performed adequately is speculative at best. There's no evidence, there's no facts that that wouldn't happen. It's a presumption. And there is a protection in place by way of a lien. And that's common practice and HOAs with these types of requirements and the mechanism for the town to protect and to the extent that the work's not performed or is not performed correctly is standard. I also heard a comment relative to access to the lot that's being provided to the land trust. There is access. There's access through another portion of the land trust, and the community can certainly utilize that property subject to the rules of the land trust. And there's no authority and there's no requirement for this developer to put an easement in, which is an encumbrance, which has an effect on property value, as well as other things, including the potential of injury and the like. There is absolutely no requirement and no authority to request that this applicant put an easement on any of these lots to provide access to this lot that is being gifted to the land trust. And I would think that many of the community members that spoke about that today would not want an easement on their property, would not want an encumbrance on their property that could affect their ability to sell the property, nor would they want an easement with no indemnification, meaning that if somebody from the public were to use it and they were to be injured, that property owner could potentially be liable. So that's not something that we'll do, and that's not something that the law requires. With respect to the drainage issues that may have been referenced, I'll open it up to Mr. Andrade. I do think that our testimony here today has answered those questions. But Mr. Andrade, if you could reiterate some of your testimony relative to those concerns.
Mr. Andrade.
Yes, so in regards to all the concerns that were brought up, a lot of them were in pertaining to hypotheticals of what could and potentially will happen, and whether they're maintained in the future. The design standards that we go under can't be under what we assume might or might not happen. And so we follow the stormwater management handbook and the guidelines that DEM sets out, and the town also requires us to meet. This design is considered one, green, because we've reduced the use of underground piping, any other structures. It's cheaper to maintain and it's cheaper to fix in the future for the town's cost. And if it's under the HOA, the same exact thing. The stormwater, we are designing for the 100-year storm, and our peak flow is reduced from the average peak flow for the design point of that. If you look in the rear where the overflow earthen berm is, the design flow that gets to that point essentially before we put in these houses, before the road, we are actually going to slow that or equal it at the 100-year storm. So the design is that we're not making a worst case scenario. In a lot of the case, it's becoming equal or better.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could also add, there are 3 experts that have provided either testimony or evidence to this board. From my team, Mr. McLean, as well as Mr. Andrade, and also the town planner, who has provided a positive recommendation, has provided a positive recommendation for approval, has provided a positive recommendation relative to the waivers with conditions from the land trust, as well as the conditions that were identified in the memorandum. So the evidence that's before the board relative to these issues and relative to compliance with state law as it relates to the finding of facts that must be rendered in order to approve this project. The only evidence before the board is positive in nature as it relates to the expert testimony that's been presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Resnick. I know there was a question relative to the drainage easement between the lots, lot 2 and the adjoining lot. And it's my understanding when there's a drainage easement, nothing, because there was a question about putting a fence up. If there's a drainage easement, you're not allowed to put up a fence or even plant shrubbery because it's got to be maintained clear for access purposes. That is my understanding. But I know there was a question that someone had brought up in the audience, and I want to make sure we clear that up.
All right, I'd be
Chairman.
happy to. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Attorney Salvatore.
Salvatore.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That is correct. And the easement will be also in favor of the town in the event that the homeowners association does not take care of these maintenance responsibilities. The town will have to get in there. So nothing can be blocked.
And I would just add, if I may, an easement is a form of a contract. And so when we create our HOA documents and we coordinate with the town's attorney, we'll make sure that the language that we need in both the HOA, the maintenance agreement, as well as the drainage easement has everything that we need to ensure that the drainage will not be impacted in any way by any type of construction or the like. And as the town's attorney just noted, that the town has the ability to come in and obviate any issue that may occur as a result of the HOA falling short. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Resnick. At this point, I will ask the board if they have any comments or questions based on the testimony that was given tonight by the abutters. Mr.
Chairman.
McDonald.
I have a question based upon their experience, both of the solicitor and Mr. Stevens with his work down in Warwick Cranston area in planning. I know I can't ask for a number, but the arrangement that we have here, where we're going to have a basin, in the experience of Mr. Stevens and Ms. Salvatore, not numbers, I guess, but numbers perhaps if you have, how many do we have in town? And I know you've only been a solicitor for a year-ish or so, but you've been in the planning department as well. And this is a question not for you, not for the two of you, but maybe just inferentially in town, since you're involved in planning. Has Public Works been called out to have to perform cleaning up basins because the homeowners associations have been remiss in their duties?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Salvatore.
so just to put it in context, I have been involved in town government since 2002. So quite a while, planning director for 3.5 years, town solicitor for 3 years now, and also always involved with the town in various capacities. These HOAs are relatively new, I would say within the last 15 years or so. You have a planning board member that has a detention pond in his backyard, and I know he takes really good care of it because he's in my neighborhood, and there is no homeowners association. I will also tell you that I am unaware of, I think I can think of one instance where the town had to go in and take over maintenance for a short period of time where neighbors were refusing to maintain a basin. And that was once, and they learned their lesson and they never did it again. I am unaware of that. As the solicitor, I think I would have been aware in the last 3 years. I would have become aware. Also as planner, I think I would have become aware, and I think that's when that happened in the one instance. But Jonathan, I don't know if you have any other occasion to have known where the town has to step in.
Yeah, and Roy Costa may be the expert we're looking to talk to here, but I think maintenance is a function of sand and debris infiltration. And so if someone's actively maintaining in this case, a three lot basin, you're going to get runoff into the basin, which will have sand, sedimentation, and debris. You know, it's probably every 2 or 3 years you may have to do something, but this is actually it's a relatively flat area, and it's a relatively small area of a surface area that's going to be impacting. So I'm not convinced it's a big issue. It's more of an engineering, DPW, Bob Anderson would probably be most qualified to speak to in terms of frequency, but I don't think it's going to be a nuisance unless there's a lot of negligence involved.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Scone.
Yeah, I have a question in regard to the septic systems. Are those cast in stone? Not to do a pun here, but where they're located, because it looks like at least on lot 3, if they have to change that in any way, there's not a lot of room, obviously, to go backwards or forwards. And of course, I'm not an engineer and I'm not savvy to all of the particulars to it, but it caught my attention that these are not something that are specific at this particular point in time. So what happens if these things have to move? and there's not enough room, to accommodate the proposed house.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to answer that. This is all regarding the building envelope. The town does not approve where the ISDS system is sited. The DEM approves that. If this was not approved by DEM, in theory, they wouldn't be able to build the house. I'm assuming that somewhere on these properties, there would be a place for the septic, and perhaps they've already submitted to DEM. I'm sure the applicant can answer that. But as your attorney, I just want to let you know that none of the location of either the house or the septic is really under your purview other than the building envelope. So.
Thank you.
That's fine, but obviously, has this been approved by DEM?
Mr. Resnick?
Mr. Andre, could you discuss for the board the status of the septic systems?
Yeah, so we did an initial preliminary study with DEM to, one, check with the wetlands, and two, to check with the OWTS systems. We did initial perks, we verified that the land did perk, and we did initial designs, which is essentially what you've seen here. They will get, so because of like the variations and changes in designs, we will go back to them and get final approval based off the new layouts. But the OWTSs actually kind of stayed. We tried to keep them nearly identical to the original location so that we wouldn't have any questions on whether it was approved. So it's essentially approved the way we have it designed. There is like lot 3 the significant space to actually rotate it, which would actually help in the design. So we have plenty of room to work with. We tried to keep them in the initial location based on the fact that we wanted to show something that DEM has seen that they were okay with, that also works with the design that we're showing. We'll go back once we get final approval of, okay, you guys are okay with these lot configurations, and we'll go to them and they'll approve what we design. There's significant space within these lots to get it to all fit.
So Greg, to answer your question, it's within DEM's jurisdiction, not the town's, and it's the developer's risk.
Okay, so this is not something that is approved at this particular point in time, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, and so
And I would just add, if it doesn't get approved, it doesn't get constructed. So.
Correct. I understand.
Well, there was some time ago, they used to use the term preliminary suitability, meaning the engineer would submit a application to the DEM, and they would review it based on preliminary suitability, saying, well, some of the test holes that they took shows this, and then the DEM says, okay, it looks like you've got land that is suitable for ISDS systems. We used to call them ISDS systems. So and I understand, Mr. Andre, that's sort of the process that you went through. Is they did submit something to them, and they're not going to give you the good seal of approval until you have the final design submitted. But
right.
they are on in the loop, and they know that the property and basically the suitability of the property to hold septic systems.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
Correct, exactly.
Thank you. Any more comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Bush.
Yes. I'd just like to speak to the neighbors' concerns as far as displacement of the wildlife in the area, which is a concern I also have. I do live up in the Diamond Hill area, and I'm sure there are other members on the planning board who have similar concerns. Unfortunately, we seldom consider this. We continue to develop and even develop relatively small areas like this one with no concern for the animals because, well, not to get political, but I can't help myself, but they don't contribute any money to politicians at the State House, so they don't have much say. Builders do. And building comes first, so that's what happens. I think, part of the quality of life in this area is the nature, is the wildlife. And we keep displacing them. And I look on neighbors all the time and people are screaming about, my God, I saw a coyote in my yard. And I have to think, well, of course, you displace the animals continually and they're going to be in your backyard. But I, in spite of the fact that these are relatively large lots for the area, I do agree that this is kind of a shoehorned project. When you look at the shape of these lots and the way they had to design them, with more than 2.5 to 1 dimension here. They're just odd shaped lots. All you have to do is look at the rest of the neighborhood and look at those lots, look at these lots. We're just kind of shoehorning them in a way that we can to get as many lots as possible for the developer. And I understand that. So, I have a great deal of compassion and for the neighbors who are opposing this. I believe maybe 2 lots would be better too. We don't always have to maximize the developer's profits, but I understand that the state law says as long as it meets the guidelines, it should be approved. No, I don't necessarily go along with that with a project like this where we're constantly trying to develop every square inch in the area that has, I'm sure, a lot of wildlife in this neighborhood, which contributes to the character of the neighborhood. So I have a lot of sympathy for the neighborhoods, and I think other planning board members do too. And I just want the neighbors to know that we have to approve these things based upon the existing law and not necessarily based upon our feelings, which may be different.
Thank you, Mr. Bush, and I can echo your concerns and sentiment because I feel the same way. But we are confined to the fact that we have laws that we have to follow. And when an applicant comes in and demonstrate that he's entitled to develop his property, the only thing that the board can do is ensure that they do their best to design a project that is not just acceptable to the town and the planning board members, but it adheres to all the laws that they have to conform to, including zoning and subdivision regulations, engineering regulations, and so on. But I do share your sentiment also. Mr. McDonald.
I don't want to beat this into the ground, but I have the same thoughts as Mr. Bush. I took a picture of 8 deer in my backyard just before sunset tonight. Big white-tailed deer. And I haven't had a chance to process it yet in Photoshop, and I'm going to send it to my 3 grandchildren in Pennsylvania because every time they come here, they never see wildlife. Last spring, we saw a fox nail a squirrel in the backyard. I've been doing this for 10 years. We have, on average, a couple of meetings a year. Most of them are easy, but we have meetings like this a couple of times a year where we have an issue like this, which is contentious, where people, and it's worse in this type of venue because we're not in the same room, where we listen to people, decent citizens who play by the rules. And I understand what you're saying as far as the impact on your homes. A fellow, Jim Musso, that I worked with many years ago, who lives in Florida now. He lives on Waggle Trail. And he told me about the storm about 15 years ago where this entire piece of land was underwater because of the force of the storm. But we're not, we can't use the possibility of a once in a decades long weather occurrence to block something from happening. We've got a recommendation from the experts and from the town. I'd feel a lot better as well if there are only 2 houses. But these are, this is one of those meetings where you don't enjoy your duty. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Everyone's all set, Mr. Chairman. Let me start the motions.
Okay, Mr. Butler.
In regards to Menard Estates, I'd make a motion that we combine the master and preliminary plans.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second? Do I have a second for Mr. Butler's?
Second.
Oh, second by Ms. Frashett. Any other discussion? Hearing none. I'll take a roll call. Ms. Frashett,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown. Mr. Scown,
I abstain.
okay.
Wait a minute, wait. Are you recusing for a conflict?
I don't know.
You can't just abstain unless you have a conflict.
Well, I knew one of the abutters. And I didn't realize that person was going to be involved.
Okay, all right. I is that person related to you?
No. No.
Okay.
Parties
Are they a
fam-
business associate?
At one time.
So a former business associate?
Family member was.
Okay, I mean, unless you had a business relationship or you have a family relationship, I don't see any reason why you can abstain. You've participated.
Okay, well then I'll say no.
Thank you, Mr. Scown. Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Costa,
No.
okay, and Mr. Kutu is yes. 7 yeses, 2 nos, the motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to the waivers, I don't know if you and or the solicitor have an opinion about whether I should lump them all together or if we should vote on them separately.
I personally would like to vote on them separately because there is a reason and it's obvious to everyone else on the board of which waiver that I'm concerned with. So I think we should do them individually.
In regards to Menard Estates, I'll make a motion that the waiver from section 6-E subsection 3 regarding lot proportion be approved.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Frashett. Any other discussion? Okay, I will take a roll call. Ms. Frashett,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
No,
I'm sorry,
no.
But no, McDonald.
Mr. McDonald. Oh, he's unmoved.
Mr. McDonald, unmute.
I apologize.
That's okay.
On the lot size, I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Butler,
Yes.
okay, and Mr. Scown,
No.
okay. Mr. Bush,
No.
okay. Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Oh,
is that a no?
no.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Kutu is yes. And 1, 2, 3. It's 5 yeses, 4 nos, the motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion in regards to Menard Estates that the request for a waiver from section 7-A subsection C regarding street right of way be approved.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second of Ms. Vrashich. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Okay, I want to make sure I got this right. Okay. Ms. Vrashich,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
No.
okay. Mr. Bush,
No.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
No.
Mr. Kutu votes yes. The motion carries 6 yes to 3 no's.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to Menard Estates, I make a motion that the request for a waiver from section 7-A subsection D regarding the installation of sidewalks be approved.
Motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Frashets. Roll call.
Oh, that was Mrs. Reese.
Whoop, was that Ms. Reese? I'm sorry, Ms. Reese.
That's okay.
Okay. Ms. Frashets,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
No.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
No.
Mr. Bush.
No.
Okay. Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Yes.
Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa? Is he unmuted?
No.
Okay, thank you. And of course, chair votes no. So let me double check. 1, 2, 3. The motion carries 5 yes to 4 no.
Are you sure, Mr. Kutu?
No,
I'm sorry?
David.
I think
I'm
it's the
sorry?
other way around.
I think it's
What?
the
I
other way
think-
around.
Yeah,
The other way
Hold on,
around.
wait a minute, let me double check.
Mr. Chairman, I think,
I-
yeah, name off who voted yes so that we can be clear.
Okay. Yes was Ms. Frashich, Mr. Butler, Ms. Reese, Mr. D'Ambrosio. So that's 1, 2, that's 4, right? Okay, so the motion fails, 5-4.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to Menard Estates, I'll make a motion that the request for a waiver from section 7-A subsection H regarding cul-de-sac design be approved.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second. ahead.
Was that Ms. Reese?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kutu,
Yes.
can you just describe what that waiver is? I just want to be clear.
This is rave, number 4 cul-de-sac design. That's for the.
Right, but what about it? Because
uh,
I just want the board to understand, this was requested by the Public Works Director.
Correct. It's to fully pave it and not have an island in the middle. Yep.
You said
No landscaped island. Mr.
Okay,
Bo- no landscaped island. So, I got a second on that. So Ms. Frasic,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Voting yes is to vote in agreement with the Public Works Department. Is that correct?
yes.
Then I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Bush,
yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
No.
Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Yes.
yes?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes. That's 8, motion carries 8 yes, 9 no.
One no.
No, it's 7 yes and 1 no,
Hang
I
on,
believe.
hang on, let me say. 7 yes?
I believe that's what it was.
4,
I have
5, 6. I got 8.
Hey, I have 8 too as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
My apologies.
I mean, the only no was Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to Menard Estate, I'll move that we approve the master and preliminary plans with the following 4 conditions. Number 1, the applicant shall establish a homeowners association and that includes within its bylaws an operations and maintenance plan for the stormwater basin. Number 2, the applicant shall provide certifications from the water and sewer departments. Number 3, upon completion of the roadway extension, the applicant shall petition the town council to accept the road as a town road. And number 4, that all of the conditions outlined in the letter from the Cumberland Land Trust must be met. And include the motion, Mr. Modica's memo dated January 18th, 2022.
Have motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Salvatore?
I really just looked at the land trust letter today, so I apologize for that. Their last, essentially their last condition is a final approval acceptance letter to be issued by the Cumberland Land Trust upon a site inspection after 100% of the site work is completed.
Mhm.
This would be challenging because the deed would have to be recorded with the final plan before any construction even begins. So I would ask that you approve it subject to the land trust letter excluding item 7. And if they don't want to accept it, they'd have to come back. But that deed has to be recorded with final plan. And I would also just state that the homeowners association agreement and O&M agreement must be approved by the solicitor and the public works director.
I'll amend my motion to incorporate the solicitor's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. So I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. McDonald.
And one more thing, I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
That's okay, that's fine.
Did Mr. Butler's motion include the request that final plan be delegated to the planning department?
No, but I'm happy to add that.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. So I will take a roll call. Ms. Frasic,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Butler.
Yes.
Hold on, I gotta
Now?
go 1 second.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Bush,
No.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. The motion carries 8 yes and 1 no, 1 nay.
And I think the final motion, Mr. Chairman, in regards to Menard Estates, I'd move that we approve the performance and maintenance guarantees as outlined in Mr. Anderson's memo of January 20th, 2022, totaling $226,391, which includes a $37,732 maintenance bond. And include in the motion, Mr. Anderson's emails and memos from Thursday, January 20th, 2022.
I have a motion by Mr. Butler. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second by Ms. Vrashich. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call. Ms. Vrashich,
yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Butler,
Yes.
Mr. Scown,
Yes.
Mr. Bush,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. D'Ambrosia,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
and Mr. Kusu votes yes. So the motion carries 9-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I might add just one comment, and I'm not sure that we need a motion for it, but I just want to make sure that I'm clear on how to proceed as to one item. The waiver relative to the sidewalk installation, and that was section 7AD, which did not pass. We would request that we have the opportunity to revise the plans to add these sidewalks, but in connection with our final plan approval, which the board has voted to do administratively. And I just want to make sure that that doesn't require a motion and that we're all on the same page as to that.
Okay, Ms. Salvatore?
Yes, I believe because that waiver wasn't granted and because final plan was delegated to the administrative officer, the administrative officer would work in conjunction with the public works director to be sure that that sidewalk was properly designed, et cetera. So no motion necessary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the members of the board for all their time this evening. It's been a very long hearing. Thank you for your attention to our presentation. Much appreciated.
Well, I can tell you that we've had longer.
I had a longer one last night.
This is the longest we've had in some time, but I can tell you, we've gone to midnight sometimes, so.
Well, we're getting your endurance for 2022.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, public comments. If there are none.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chair, all right, someone has raised their hand.
Okay.
Scott Sanford.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Stanford?
He's coming.
Okay.
Scott, you're on. You just need to unmute. Okay, there you go.
Hi,
Hi.
Maureen Sanford, 18 Wampum Trail. I just want to say I'm very disappointed in the decision, and it's going to impact all our lives here and the town of Cumberland. So happy for the developer to get his maximum money. And that's all I have to say.
So I thank you for that comment, but as you realize that there's only so much that the planning board can do, and as far as denying a project, and again, it's been stated that, if he conforms to actually the state, federal, and local regulation laws and regulations, the only thing that the planning board can do is make sure that he is held to those standards. And I think Mr. Bush and I also had commented earlier that, and I can put it this way: when projects come before the planning board, it's not always projects that the planning board likes, for whatever variety of reasons. However, it's what the applicant is entitled to, and we have to go to that standard. So I do appreciate your concerns. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I grew up in this town and it's just very sad to see what's happening to this town for money. It's just sad. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Sad.
All set, Mr. Moroka?
No one else is raising their hand.
Okay. With that being.
Mr. McDonald has, seems to
Mr.
put
Mc-
his physical
Yes,
hand
Mr.
up.
Yep,
Thank
Mr.
you.
McDonald.
I just have a comment, and it's about the inconsistency between the land development and subdivision regulations and the zoning ordinance regarding lot proportions. They're really not even close, and it's certainly, in an ideal world, those two documents would be in accord. It would certainly, down the road, make the planning department and this board's job potentially easier. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Alberto.
thank you, Mr. McDonald, for reminding me that under the director's report, perhaps we should have advised you that the planning director, the deputy planning director, the building official, and the building inspector and myself are meeting on a weekly basis for about an hour to go through the entire zoning ordinance. That will involve reviewing the development regulations, mostly for inconsistencies with each other or within the document or state law. We're not trying to recreate the wheel, but this is a good opportunity to say, if you see anything in the zoning ordinance or land development regulations that we should be looking at, please send us an email. I expect that this will take about 2 to 3 months to get through, and there should be a significant ordinance submitted to you at that point.
Thank you.
All set, everyone? Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
With that said, motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Frashitz. Got a second? Got a second? Second, Mr. Scown. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays out there? No, I wouldn't think so.
At this time, no.
Thank you.
Hold off.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you,
Good night.
everyone.